Today we're going to talk about breastfeeding. It's something I'm very passionate about because it's not something that's always come easy for me, and I know it doesn't for many mamas. We had a lot of breastfeeding struggles with my first, and there's just been little things here and there with all of my others that I just want to talk about and give you some encouragement on. If you have never breastfed and you're kind of concerned, you're wondering all these questions, I'm going to be answering some questions that I personally had myself through my breastfeeding journeys that some other mamas might be wondering if they are new to this, or maybe you have been breastfeeding and it's just not the dream that you thought it would be, that other mamas make it come out to be. We're going to talk about that a little bit today. So first and foremost, I want to encourage you not to just blindly listen to everything I'm telling you on this video or any video on the internet, because we all are given a motherly intuition and we know if something feels right, something feels wrong, if we're comfortable with this, if we're not comfortable with something. So first and foremost, listen to that. Try your best to tune out all the outside noise of this opinion and this opinion, even my own opinion, because ultimately you and your baby have a very close bond, and breastfeeding is part of that. And if you will listen to that intuition, it will take you a lot further than any advice anyone's going to give you on the internet, including myself. So why am I even making this video? Because I actually watched videos like this when I was first starting, and I know it can be encouraging just to hear some encouragement from another mama who's been there before you and a little advice along the way. So if nothing that I say resonates with you today, that's fine. You can lean into your intuition, and it does not matter what anyone on the internet tells you, what any professional tells you. If something feels right or wrong with you and your baby, lean into that and trust, follow your baby's signals. Breastfeeding will come. I'm not saying it's going to come easily, but it will come. It is a natural process of life. So let's just jump into a few questions. So these are questions that I personally had myself, thinking back to my first breastfeeding journey. So can I even breastfeed? So that was a concern of mine. Now I have some other obstacles that we'll talk about later in this video that had me concerned about breastfeeding, but the short answer to that is yes, all women, all mammals actually, should be able to breastfeed and lactate for their children. Now I'm not saying it's going to be easy. I'm not saying you're just going to have this huge surplus of milk all of a sudden, but you should be able to breastfeed. It's actually very rare that women cannot breastfeed, and a lot of times it has to do with their nipple shape. They could have inverted nipples or flat nipples or tubular shaped breasts. Those can cause some milk supply issues, but still they should be able to breastfeed. So I don't want to downplay any women that have had no milk or have had trouble lactating, because it's not always easy. A lot of it does depend on your diet and how well you take care of yourself and the quality of your milk. It truly depends on the quality of your diet and hydration and protein, but physiologically you should be able to breastfeed. So I wouldn't worry about that up front. If you've never had children and you're worried about being able to breastfeed and lactate, I wouldn't worry about that up front. Don't worry about something that you have no idea. Don't worry about anything ever. The Lord says we should not worry, we should cast our cares onto Him. But if that is a concern of yours, let it go until you actually see if that is an actual concern, because physiologically most women will be able to lactate and breastfeed their babies. So with that, will I have enough milk? So that is a question that personally I had a lot of questions about, because when my first child, I did not have enough milk. And we'll talk about that again, as I mentioned at the end, some of the issues that I personally had with the milk supply. But that kind of goes back to sufficient lactation tissue, and having enough milk is not dependent on your breast size. There are women with very small A-size breasts that have plenty of milk for their baby, whereas there's women that have larger breasts and have lower milk supply. It's not dependent on your breast size, as many may believe. So will you have enough milk? If there's enough supply and demand, if you're staying hydrated well, I don't recommend just water. I recommend drinking water that's kind of fluffed up, so with maybe some added minerals, some salt, some magnesium. Any way you can get minerals into your hydration, even better, as well as eating enough protein. This one is just so underrated. There's so many lactation foods created out there, but if you really look at them, a lot of them are not high protein, and ultimately I found that is what helps you lactate and have enough milk the best, is a high protein diet. Basically for every pound you weigh, that much in that many grams of protein. So 150 for a woman, 150 grams of protein a day, give or take, is going to help you have the most highest milk supply that you could have for your baby, as well as staying well hydrated. Let's talk about the first breastfeeding right after birth, because that's a concern, a really big concern of mamas when babies are born in a hospital. Doctors and nurses will often say, well, it doesn't look like you have enough milk yet. Let's supplement baby. Let's go ahead and let them supplement. But we seem to have all forgotten how small babies' bellies are at birth. And we make colostrum for a reason at birth. All mammals make colostrum. It is the ultimate liquid gold for babies, for all mammals. It's so full of nutrient dense vitamins and minerals that babies need right at birth. And not just babies, all animals. We live on a farm and we have seen the value of a baby getting colostrum right at birth and how detrimental it can be if a baby animal does not get colostrum right at birth. And that is so important for humans as well. We seem to have forgotten that at birth, babies' bellies are the size of an acorn. They only need a few drops of colostrum to be satisfied. So if they're really fussy, it could be related to other reasons, not just hunger, as most professionals in the hospital will conclude that they're just hungry and we need to supplement with something. And while that can be a necessity, I don't feel like it's a necessity as often as it is made to be. So maybe baby is having issues from the birth, the traumatic birth, they're having some positioning issues from how they were in the birth canal or how they were in the uterus. So definitely isn't always babies fussing because of hunger, because baby's belly is so tiny. They get full very quickly off little drops of colostrum. This first 72 hours is when baby is getting colostrum, and yes, babies are going to drop weight in that time frame just from losing fluid from the birth, getting that little bit of colostrum, but I assure you, in most cases, that colostrum is enough until your full milk supply comes in. So when will your milk supply come in? Let's lead into that question. If you're a first-time mama, personally for me, mine didn't come in until about 3 days, so about 72 hours. But each subsequent birth after that, my milk came in between 2 and 3 days, so about 48 to 50 something hours, somewhere in there, is when my milk came in the subsequent birth. So first time mamas, it takes a little longer. Your body's just learning what to do. But after that, I found personally, and for other mamas, that it does come in a little sooner with your second, third, fourth, whatever birth you're on. So just be patient. Just, again, trust your intuition. If you feel like baby is getting enough, they're getting enough. Just trust that intuition and don't let all those outside sources sway you differently. If you don't feel that you need to supplement your baby with something, and you trust that your colostrum in those first hours is enough, because that's how God designed it to be. He designed that colostrum to be so rich in nutrient for babies to sustain them until your full milk supply comes in. So when your milk supply comes in, you're going to feel that really hard kind of lumpy engorgement, and that is okay. It's quite uncomfortable, but once baby starts to latch and you start to empty the breast, that will become much more comfortable, and don't think it's going to last forever. That feeling of engorgement and that those lumpy knots only last, for me personally, 2 or 3 days, and then it kind of evens out. But that is when it's very uncomfortable to sleep on your chest, because it's like rock hard, lumpy breast that where the milk is trying to regulate. So don't think that's going to last forever, and that's going to be how your breasts feel for the next year or so as you breastfeed. All right, let's talk about latch issues, because this is a huge one in society today. It's such a buzzword of baby has a bad latch, baby's not nursing well. But again, we're gonna say, let's go back to that intuition. And there are specialized lactation consultants for this. I am not specialized in this. There is someone you can find through your pediatrician, through your hospital, through your midwife that can help you specialize in looking at latch and baby's latch. But from what I have found, if baby's lips are flanged open around the breast and you can hear them swallowing, and they'll start out really fast sucking, and then you can hear them swallowing, they are getting milk. Now, I'm not going to say that this is not going to be a little uncomfortable for you. We're going to lead into the next question in a minute of, is breastfeeding painful? But latch issues can equal pain, but that doesn't necessarily mean baby is not getting milk or enough milk. I think our society all too often rushes to fixing a problem or labeling a problem, where, and if y'all know I'm getting at ties, tongue ties, lip ties, because two for sure, part of a third of one of my children have had painful latches initially. and we automatically assume, oh no, baby has a tie, baby has an issue breastfeeding, we need to remedy that. But none of my children have been remedied of ties, and I'm not saying that you're wrong if you have or if you want to, but I'm just saying that might not need to be the first conclusion you jump to, because just think about it, one of the most sensitive areas of the body is now being assaulted multiple times a day, and we expect it not to be pain-free at all. Now, it ultimately shouldn't be like bleeding painfully, but there is some discomfort that comes with that. I'm not going to say that breastfeeding has all been golden and beautiful and just bliss and a breeze, because I have had painful latches. When baby initially latched and started initiating the letdown, it was excruciating. I had to close my eyes, kind of hold my breath, because it was painful. And that's what a lot of mamas experience, and then it kind of leads them to give up. They think that baby has a latch issue, or that something's just wrong with them because breastfeeding is painful. They're having this extreme nipple pain. And honestly though, that pain for me would go away within about 30 seconds to a minute, and then the latch will be fine. All I'm saying is don't just automatically jump to that. I read some testimonials of some people talking about this, and people chiming in from other countries had not even heard about these ties and these latch issues. They just breastfed their babies, and there wasn't a label put to it. I feel like in the US, we always have to put a label to something to try to fix something, when if your intuition is telling you that baby's eating, baby's gaining weight, baby's happy, they're satisfied, they're sleeping because they're getting full tummies, I don't believe we should automatically jump to some sort of revision just because we're in some pain, because a lot of times that will correct itself and there is really no need for revision. Now, I'm not giving medical advice here, I'm just giving my opinion here, because if I had taken my children to someone specialized in latch and ties, 2 of my children I know would have probably been recommended a revision, whereas none of them have, and they all have their speech is all fine, they've gained weight just fine through breastfeeding. Back to being painful, yes, it can be painful. Should it be painful through the entire nursing session? I don't believe it really should, but that is going to depend on every mama. Breastfeeding is not all roses and rainbows. Maybe for some women it is, but it is painless. And I have had painless nursing sessions that are beautiful, and there is a close line. And then I've had very painful nursing sessions where my husband looks over and my face is like all wince up and I'm holding my breath, and he's like, what's wrong? And I'm like, this initial latch on this one side is so painful. Just wanted to say here that latches may not always be comfortable. That doesn't necessarily mean that there is a revision needed. That's completely your intuition. If you feel that needs to be done, go for it. If not, trust your baby, trust that they're gaining, trust your ability to feed and nourish your baby, and again, push away the outside sources, outside opinions, if this is not something you feel confident in and agree with, if baby seems fine otherwise. That's just my opinion there. I'm not giving medical advice at all on ties and latch issues. I'm not a lactation consultant. This is just my own experience, and a lot of times I can maneuver baby's lip or even reposition them from maybe like a cradle hold to a football hold to help them latch better. Let me actually show y'all these holds with a stuffed animal that I'm gonna grab real quick. We have a little gingerbread man. So this is a cradle hold, just cradling them at the breast. Cross cradles, so I'm holding them across. I think I'm saying these right, but maneuvering baby into a different breastfeeding position can help with latch issues. This is a football hold. This is one of my favorites for newborns. Cross cradle is one of my favorites for when I'm cooking or up and about. What's some more? I mean, you can nurse in a carrier where baby's up like this. You can lay down and nurse a crossways. So there's so many positions you can switch to if you feel there is a latch issue, and that can even remedy it. Moving your child's lip to kind of create a better latch, kind of put your thumb in the side of their mouth to kind of reposition their flange. All of that can help. But again, a lactation consultant can definitely help with latch. But what I'm getting at here is it may not necessarily need to jump to the conclusion of a revision. Okay, how often should I nurse my baby? So again, this is an intuition one, but a rough guideline, midwives, doctors are going to tell you about every 2 to 3 hours, especially in those first days. I usually stick to about every 3 hours on or on demand. I personally nurse on demand, but a good rule of thumb is every 2 to 3 hours. And in those early days, baby's going to be sleeping so much that 2 to 3 hours, you're going to find you actually have to wake baby up to nurse them and get them to breastfeed, but that's a good rule of thumb. And then how long should I nurse my baby for? So this, again, is your intuition. If baby is at the breast and they're satisfied and they're falling asleep, and you don't feel like they need to wake up and nurse on the other side or be woken up and continue nursing, just let them sleep. They'll wake up and they'll ask for the breast again, and you can continue breastfeeding. That's more nursing on demand, which is what I personally do. So if you are one that wants to stick to schedules, you may need to wake them up so they can continue the feeding session. But good rule of thumb, I'd say in those early days, nursing takes 20 to 45 minutes because they are small, they are eating slower. But they can nurse for 10 minutes and fall asleep, and then sleep for an hour, wake back up and nurse again. That's personally what we do. I just enjoy holding and nursing my newborn babies and don't worry about feeding schedules, especially there at the beginning. But if you're one that wants schedules, you can go for a good rule of thumb every 2 to 3 hours for, I'd say, about 30 minutes. But if you are like timing baby and they're eating on the right and 30 minutes is up and you're like, okay, baby, it's time to get off. You could be having them miss out on that hind milk, which if you have much experience with milking a cow, which you probably don't, the cream, the hind milk is what comes out at the end. So if you're taking baby off the breast too early, they're not going to get that good fatty hind milk, which helps them put on weight if you take them off too quickly because you're following a time limit. So I always recommend just letting baby nurse until they're content. If they finish one side and it feels empty and they need to move to the other, they'll give you some cues. They might still have their hands clenched together. That's kind of a hunger sign. When their hands are open and they're very relaxed and kind of look milk drunk, that's a sign that they're full. If they're just real clenched up and tight and have the fists and they're kind of in a ball, heads are kind of drawn in, that means they're still hungry. So you'll learn, again, listening to your intuition, you will learn your baby's hunger cues and their cues that they need to nurse longer and maybe they don't need to nurse as long. So again, your intuition is the best advice I can give you. Should I pump? So this is definitely going to depend on if you are leaving the home. With my first 2 children, I did still have an outside job, so pumping was a necessity. I didn't start pumping immediately because I do like to have just a little bit of true nursing my baby and not having to worry about pumping. I will use the Haka, which is a little device you can hook onto one side while you're nursing on the other. Now, if you are using Haka, I recommend holding baby in a football hold, because if you have baby like this, they can kick the Haka off, whereas if you have them in the football hold, cradling them like that, you can have the Haka on one side or vice versa. Whatever works the best. And then I also will introduce a hand pump. Same position, hold baby in a football hold, hand pump. That's how I start stashing in the freezer for when I go back to work. Now with my 3rd child, I did not pump at all. I was staying at home with her. I had no reason to pump. Pumping is not necessary. You don't need a freezer stash full of milk. If you're worried about an emergency, if you know a family member that would gladly, a friend who's also lactating that would gladly feed your child in an emergency, could look into that. We'll talk about another option at the end of this video for if breastfeeding all of a sudden becomes unavailable. But with my 3rd child, I did not pump at all. With my 4th and current child, I did pump a little bit while I'm still holding this doll. But again, I'm gonna tell you my story about that at the end of this video. So should you pump? It's your opinion. When did you start pumping? Definitely recommend not pumping too early, because then you can kick your body into overproducing. But I do recommend, it is recommended to pump before 6 weeks, because about 6 weeks is when your body will regulate the milk supply and it knows kind of what your baby needs. So if you're wanting to kind of increase your supply, do that maybe around 3-4 weeks, get in there before 6 weeks to kind of let your body know what it is expected to make, because again, this is all about supply and demand. Pumping, again, personal opinion, I start pumping around 3 weeks with just a hand pump if I need to stash. If I don't pump at all. I would recommend starting before 6 weeks, before that milk starts to regulate out to its optimal kind of like standard amount that your body's gonna make. Is baby getting enough milk? So with my first, we had some weight gain issues, and I was very concerned about, is he getting enough milk? Is he satisfied? Is he happy? And this really goes back to, is your baby gaining weight? Are they having plenty of pees and poops? Get down, buddy. In the beginning, your doctor or midwife is going to ask you to want to see so many wet diapers a day and so many poopy diapers a day. I think it's like every day of life, that's how many dirty diapers they should have. So day 1, 1 poop, day 2, 2 poops, it's something like that. But your provider can elaborate on that, on how many pees and poops. But if the baby is meeting that, they're getting enough milk. You may not think they're getting enough milk because you're not actually seeing what they are taking. I think that's why so many people end up wanting to do bottles and supplement, because they can see, oh, baby got 4 ounces of milk, 6 ounces of milk. Whereas just breastfeeding, you're not actually knowing what baby's getting, and you have to lean into your intuition and trust. And I think that's very hard for women of today, because we are so out of tune with our intuition and are so used to just relying on outside sources. But your baby's getting enough. If they're gaining weight, they're happy, they're content, not necessarily happy, but content. They're not balled up in fists all the time, showing those hunger cues, and they're peeing and pooping enough. So again, that's something you can talk more about with your provider, your pediatrician, your midwife, doctor about weight gain. But in our opinion, trusting that intuition has always done us just fine. Okay, so let's talk about a little bit of my personal breastfeeding journey. So I breastfed 4 children with implants. There's a lot of guilt around that. There's a lot of shame around that. I'll talk about that in another video, but it is what it is. We got through it. I thought that even though my breast milk was probably not as good as it could have been, as rich and as nutrient filled, had some toxins in it from the implants, I felt like it was better than the alternative with commercial options. So with my 4th child, I did have to wean him temporarily for 6 weeks to have my surgery, which I just shared the journey on if you're interested in that. I saved this part for the end because I know all of y'all this will not pertain to if you don't have implants or your breastfeeding is going beautifully. But I did want to tell you how I have breastfed through these difficult times. So I always just pushed through basically. Our children were always slower to gain weight because, again, I don't think my milk was the quality that it could have been. Now we'll see if I have another child, the difference in breastfeeding with without implants. I am relactating with my 4th, but I did have to temporarily wean him, and that's going beautifully. But I did have to temporarily wean him before the surgery, 6 weeks before surgery, just to make sure milk ducts weren't cut and milk caused any kind of infection after the surgery, after the implants were taken out. So what did I do for my baby while I had weaned him? He was between 2 and 4 months that he was not being breastfed, which was sad. It broke my heart because I absolutely love the bond with breastfeeding, even though it comes with its own challenges. There's still a beautiful, special bond created with a breastfeeding mother and their child. So it was very hard. I was still able to nurture him in other ways, but I just couldn't latch him at the breast for those 6 weeks. So what did I do during that time? Now, I have created a guide on what I did, how I fed him, how I trusted my intuition in this area. You can check it out below. This is like my first launch of anything I've personally created, so I'm really excited about this. This is a very niche topic, but I feel like some mama out there, some family out there will need this information, whether they are having to supplement for a season like I did during my surgery, whether they are unable to breastfeed due to another type of surgery or an incident, or whether they are in the very few realm of women who are physiologically unable to breastfeed, which again, that is very, very rare. But a lot of women will find the need to supplement, and that was actually me with my first son. This is how we actually found out about this method that I'm sharing with you all in the guide and what we did for him. Like, this isn't just a guide on how to make a homemade option for your child. This is like teaching you to lean into that intuition, not look at the outside sources, step by step how we did this and how we felt confident in this option. So it's not just a comprehensive guide on feeding your child. It's very thorough. It's really, my heart and soul goes around this because I know there's a lot of families who are affected by low milk supply, outside sources that cause them not to be able to breastfeed. Maybe mama is sick, or she has to have an unexpected surgery, or she has to have an elective surgery like I did, and just something comes up and they want an option to feed their child that's not the commercial option. So you can check that out below. I'm not gonna go in depth on here because sometimes these platforms don't like this type of information, but I want to have that accessible for mamas who might need it. So again, this is a very niche guide that's not going to pertain to all of my followers, because many of you guys following and many of you mamas will beautifully breastfeed your baby, and I hope that you don't ever need this information that I'm sharing in this guide. If you have any concern about breastfeeding, it's always good to have knowledge in the back of your head, research. This is a good guide information to have. So we actually started with my first because of lower milk supply related to a lot of things. Mainly, I think my implants, a lot of like birth trauma, things that happened at his birth, lower milk supply, latch issues, a lot of things with him. So we did actually use the same method. I'm sharing this guide with my first. With my next two children, my daughters, they were strictly breastfed. We did not have to do any sort of supplemental feeding, but with my fourth, we have used the same method again that I'm sharing with y'all in the guide down below. You can check it out in the link in the description box. But it has worked beautifully for my two sons that have needed it. And I just highly recommend this option, this method, this knowledge to families who are looking for a safer, I'll go ahead and say it, a safer option to feed when breastfeeding may not be a possibility. But I want to say this again, I hope that you watching this video don't ever need this information, because I hope you're able to beautifully breastfeed and have a beautiful breastfeeding journey with your child. I say beautiful because it is a beautiful bond. I did not say easy, because breastfeeding is not always easy. It does not come without its own challenges, some pain sometimes. So I hope that this is encouraging. I hope that you are encouraged to breastfeed your baby, keep that hydration intake up, keep that protein intake up so you are able to make enough milk for your baby. But if challenges arise, as they did in my own situation, due to a poor decision from my past, I want to offer this guide for you guys who might need the extra information when breastfeeding may not always work. Now, I'm talking about this in a breastfeeding video, encouraging you to breastfeed, but, and I do encourage all women to breastfeed. And I hope, again, I hope you don't have to use the information on this guide or ever even have to research it or know about it. But in the case that you might need it, I have this for you guys if it is something you ever come about needing. So share it with a family who might need this information. Maybe they are going through a difficult situation and breastfeeding has been difficult or unavailable for them personally, and this could help them have another option. This is like the first piece of content I've created and launched, all besides like just YouTube videos. I'm really excited about it. I put a lot of passion and love into it because this is something I'm very passionate about, because it is what truly, I believe, saved my first child. We were down a very hard road of breastfeeding, and without this option, I think his health would have drastically continued to decline. We were using some of the commercial options and they were making it decline even worse, knowing that it was the best for our child in that season when breastfeeding just wasn't quite enough for them. So I hope y'all are encouraged about breastfeeding. I hope you kind of let some of those fears go about breastfeeding. Again, lean into your intuition. What feels right for you is right for you and your baby, and what doesn't feel right may not be right for you in that season. And I'm wishing you and praying for you a beautiful breastfeeding journey, whether it be your first, second, third, fourth, whatever baby breastfeeding journey you're on. They all are a new experience with each new baby. They all are a beautiful blessing to be able to nourish your baby with the milk that God has given you. Please leave any advice for breastfeeding mamas down below if you have breastfed a baby and have any other advice that I may not have shared in this video or maybe I forgot about. Please leave those down below to encourage other mamas, because we need to stick together in this. There's just not enough support around breastfeeding, and that's why I think so many mamas give up and switch to the other options. But if we can encourage mamas, give them advice, teach them to lean into their intuition, I think breastfeeding would be much more common in our society today. So I'll be praying for you guys who are watching this video in your breastfeeding journeys, and I will talk to y'all soon.